Chicago slept under heavy silence that night, the kind of silence that hides danger in every shadow. In the tallest mansion on the east side, Jordan King stood by the wide glass window, watching the city lights shimmer like dying stars. His eyes were cold, the kind of cold that came from too many betrayals, too many nights spent fighting to stay alive. At 32, Jordan had built an empire on fear. Every rival bowed when he entered a room. Every word he spoke carried weight, danger, and unspoken power. People called him the Silent King because he never shouted, never laughed, never showed mercy. He ruled Chicago's underworld with a calm hand and a deadly heart. Behind him were men who would die for him. But behind that strength lived a loneliness no one could see. Jordan didn't believe in kindness. He didn't believe in love. In his world, emotions were traps, weakness disguised as beauty. He had seen what love did. He had watched his mother die for it, his best friend betray him because of it. To him, love was poison, a soft lie in a world built on blood. Every night he sat in his study with a glass of whiskey, staring at the flickering flames in the fireplace. The sound of the clock ticking was his only companion. He didn't dream. He didn't rest. He just existed, waiting for another day to fight, another night to survive. The walls of his mansion were lined with expensive art, but not a single piece brought him peace. Every face, every color reminded him of what he had lost, of what he could never have again. He had money, power, control, but not a heartbeat that loved him back. Sometimes his men whispered about him in fear. They said Jordan King didn't have a soul anymore. And maybe they were right. He had built his life like a fortress. No one entered, no one escaped. But somewhere deep in that fortress, buried under years of silence, was a man who once wanted to be good. A man who had once smiled. A man who still dreamed, though he'd never admit it. That night, as thunder rolled far away and the wind brushed against his window, Jordan felt something strange, an unease in his chest. He ignored it, poured another glass, and tried to drown it in whiskey. But his heart, the same heart he swore was dead, whispered that something was about to change. He didn't know that miles away, a young woman was walking home, tired, lost, and about to step into his world forever. He didn't know that one innocent heartbeat was about to collide with his darkness. He didn't know that fate was moving toward him, quietly, beautifully, like a candle flickering in a storm. Jordan King had no idea that by sunrise, his life would never be the same again. And when he'd look into her eyes for the first time, the man who believed love was weakness would finally feel his heart tremble. Who was that girl walking unknowingly into the lion's den? And what would happen when her innocence met his darkness? Bella Carter's life was simple, not perfect, but filled with quiet hopes. At 23, she worked double shifts at a small cafe downtown, her hands always smelling of vanilla and coffee beans. She didn't own much, just a tiny apartment, an old bicycle, and a heart that still believed in good things. Every morning, she left her home before sunrise, whispering to herself, "One day, I'll open my own bakery." It was her dream. A small place where people could smile, laugh, and forget their pain for a while. But dreams didn't come easy when the world asked too much and gave too little. That night, after a long shift, she packed her bag, said goodnight to her co-workers, and started walking home. The streets were quieter than usual, too quiet. A soft wind carried the sound of footsteps and faraway car engines. Her heart beat faster, but she told herself not to worry. Chicago nights always felt colder when you were alone. She turned left, then right, and suddenly realized she didn't recognize the road anymore. Brick walls, broken streetlights, and graffiti surrounded her. Her phone had no signal. She was lost. "Okay, Bella, don't panic," she whispered to herself. But panic doesn't listen to logic. As she walked faster, voices echoed behind her, rough, loud, angry. Men shouting, a bottle breaking, then the sound of a gun being cocked. Bella froze. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. In front of her, two black cars screeched to a stop. Men jumped out, shouting, pointing weapons, dragging another man into the street. It was chaos, flashing lights, yelling, fear. Bella covered her ears, crouched behind a trash bin, and prayed. She didn't understand what was happening. She just wanted to go home. Then suddenly, a hand grabbed her arm. She gasped, ready to scream. But before she could, someone pulled her behind a black SUV. "Stay down," a deep voice ordered. The man wore black gloves, sharp eyes scanning the scene. She didn't know it, but this was one of Jordan King's men. They thought she was someone else, someone important. In the confusion, they pushed her into the car, slammed the door, and drove away at full speed. Bella sat trembling, her eyes wide, her breath shallow. "Where are you taking me?" she whispered. No one answered. The car's tinted windows turned the outside world into darkness. The ride felt endless, cold air, silence, and the hum of power in every movement. When the car finally stopped, she saw a massive iron gate opening slowly. A mansion stood ahead, its lights glowing like something out of another world. She was led inside. Marble floors, golden chandeliers, men in suits guarding every corner. Her heart nearly stopped. Where was she? Then she saw him. Jordan King, tall, sharp, silent, stepped out from the shadows like a ghost dressed in power. His eyes, gray and unreadable, met hers. For the first time in his life, his heartbeat skipped. She looked terrified, small, shaking, her soft brown hair falling over her eyes. He should have ordered his men to let her go, but something in him refused. There was purity in her fear, innocence in her presence. And for a man who lived in a world of violence, she looked like light. "Who is she?" he asked quietly. "Wrong girl, boss," one of his men replied. "We thought she was the target's sister." Jordan's eyes didn't leave her face. She wasn't the target, but somehow she felt like destiny. Bella tried to speak, but her voice cracked. "I didn't do anything. Please, I just want to go home." And when he heard her trembling voice, something inside him, something frozen for years, began to melt. He stepped closer. She flinched, but he only whispered, "You're safe now. No one will hurt you." And those words, from a Mafia boss's mouth, sounded more like a promise than a threat. For the first time, Jordan King didn't see a stranger. He saw a reason to feel again. As the mansion doors closed behind her, Bella didn't know she had just stepped into the most dangerous and most beautiful chapter of her life. But why did Jordan's eyes follow her like he'd seen a ghost from his past? The air inside Jordan King's mansion felt colder than winter. Every corner whispered stories of violence, power, and pain. Bella stood in the middle of the grand hallway, her small hands clutched around her bag like it was her last piece of safety. Tall men in black suits moved around silently, their eyes sharp, their guns hidden, but never far. She didn't belong there, and she knew it. Her heart raced like a trapped bird. Every breath she took echoed softly in the marble hall. Jordan stood a few feet away, his expression unreadable, calm, yet watchful. He had seen thousands of faces, liars, thieves, enemies, traitors, but none like hers. There was something about her silence, her soft fear, her innocence that unsettled him in a way bullets never could. "Take her to the guest room," he ordered quietly. His men nodded and led her upstairs. Bella's steps were small, hesitant. The mansion felt like a palace of shadows, filled with wealth but empty of warmth. Every painting on the wall seemed to watch her pass. She had no idea what kind of man Jordan King was. She only knew he had eyes that could both freeze and protect. When they reached the guest room, it was more beautiful than any place she had ever seen. White silk sheets, soft lights, a golden frame mirror. But Bella didn't feel safe. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands shaking, her thoughts spinning. What if they hurt me? What if I never see my home again? Downstairs, Jordan poured himself a drink but didn't touch it. Her voice, her trembling thank you from earlier, kept echoing in his mind. He'd told her she wouldn't be harmed, and he meant it. For reasons he couldn't explain, he needed to protect her. Later that night, when the house had gone quiet, he went to her room. He didn't knock. He never did. But this time, he hesitated at the door. Through the crack, he saw her sitting by the window, hugging her knees, staring at the moon. Her face glowed softly under the silver light, and for the first time in years, Jordan's heart ached. Not from anger, but something tender. Something dangerous. He stepped inside. Bella turned quickly, startled. "I'm sorry," he said, 2 words that sounded foreign coming from his lips. I just wanted to thank you," she whispered, "for not letting them hurt me." Her voice trembled like a song only he could hear. Jordan's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to gratitude. People feared him, obeyed him, cursed him, but no one thanked him. "You don't belong in this world," he said quietly. "You should have never walked those streets alone." "I didn't mean to," she said softly. "I was just lost." Something in her tone made him look away. He wasn't used to innocence. It burned him like sunlight touching ice. Then she smiled, weak but warm. "You're not as scary as you look." That made him freeze. No one had ever dared to say that to his face. And yet when she said it, he felt human again. For a long moment they just stood there. The Mafia boss and the innocent girl. Two broken worlds meeting in fragile peace. He finally whispered, "Get some rest. You're safe here." And for the first time in years, his voice carried softness, the kind that could melt even fear itself. As he walked out, she said quietly, "Thank you, Jordan." Her words followed him down the hallway, slipping past his armor like a heartbeat he couldn't silence. He didn't know it yet, but that single moment, her voice, her gratitude, her calmness, had cracked something inside him. Something deep, something dangerous. That night, Jordan couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, thinking about her smile. He'd promised her safety, but he didn't realize he just invited peace, and with it, chaos, into his own heart. Jordan doesn't know it yet, but the night is far from over. Something will happen before morning that will test his promise and change everything between them. The night had grown quiet inside Jordan's mansion. The moonlight fell through the tall windows, painting silver lines across the marble floor. The house that usually echoed with orders, footsteps, and danger was now hushed, almost peaceful. Jordan walked down the long corridor, his footsteps soft, his mind restless. Sleep had abandoned him hours ago. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face, Bella's soft, uncertain smile, her gentle eyes that carried both fear and kindness. It was strange. He had seen hundreds of faces, but hers stayed. As he passed the living room, he stopped. There she was, sitting near the fireplace, wrapped in one of his thick blankets. The fire's orange glow touched her skin, making her look almost unreal, like a painting come to life. She turned as if she felt his presence. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked softly. Jordan hesitated, then shook his head. "No." She smiled faintly and patted the space beside her. "Maybe talking helps," she said. For reasons he couldn't explain, he walked closer and sat beside her. The warmth of the fire brushed against their faces, and the silence between them began to soften. They talked, really talked. Not about the world he ruled or the darkness that followed him, but about life. She told him about her childhood, the smell of her mother's baking, the way she used to chase fireflies behind her house in summer. He listened quietly, as if every word from her lips was something sacred. Then she asked gently, "And you? What were you like before all this?" Jordan stared into the flames. "I was someone who believed in things," he said. "Goodness, maybe, family, love." He gave a bitter smile. "But I learned that goodness doesn't survive in my world. It gets you killed." Bella's eyes softened. "There's still good in you, Jordan. You just forgot how to see it." Her words struck him harder than any bullet ever had. He turned toward her, searching her face. No one had spoken to him like that, with belief, not fear. For a long moment they just sat there, the silence thick with something unspoken. Then Bella winced. Jordan's eyes narrowed. "What's wrong?" She tried to hide her hand, but he saw it. A small cut on her palm, fresh, bleeding lightly. I dropped a glass earlier," she said quickly. He grabbed her wrist gently but firmly. "You're hurt." "It's nothing." "Don't move," he said, his voice deep but strangely tender. He reached for a cloth and pressed it against her palm. But as he saw the red line of blood, his chest tightened. Something ancient and fierce moved inside him. Not lust, not control, but fear. Fear that someone so pure could bleed because of his world. His hands trembled slightly. She noticed. "Jordan, it's okay." "No," he whispered, his voice low, raw. "It's not." He looked at her, really looked at her. The girl who had walked into his darkness and somehow brought light with her. The girl who smiled even when afraid. The girl who was untouched by greed, by sin, by cruelty. In that moment he realized how fragile she was, and how dangerous his world could be to someone like her. He could have done what many powerful men would do, take, claim, control. But Jordan King, the feared Mafia boss, did something no one would ever believe. He lifted her injured hand to his lips. Gently, carefully, he kissed her fingers, not with desire but with reverence. Her breath caught. No one had ever touched her that way. Not like she was a treasure, not like she was safe. "I'll protect you," he whispered against her skin. "Always." Bella's eyes glistened. something inside her broke. Not from fear, but from the feeling of being seen, finally, truly seen. The fire cracked softly, throwing light over their faces as silence wrapped them again. He released her hand slowly, his eyes lingering just a moment too long. Neither spoke, neither needed to. But both knew something irreversible had happened. Jordan didn't know if it was salvation or destruction, but one thing was certain. That night, the cold-hearted king had finally felt his heart beat again. But outside the mansion walls, danger was already watching. And by dawn, the world that had given Jordan peace would soon try to take it away. The days that followed were unlike any Jordan king had ever known. For years his mansion had been a prison of silence, until Bella's laughter filled its halls. Every morning she'd hum softly while making coffee, and every night she'd leave a trail of calm in a place that had never known peace. Jordan began to notice the smallest things, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the way she whispered to herself when she cooked. She didn't walk through his world like a guest. She moved through it like a healing breath of air. The men who worked for him didn't understand, but they saw it too. Their boss was changing. At midnight, when the world outside turned cold and still, Bella would find him in his library. Books surrounded him, books he hadn't opened in years. She'd sit across from him, sometimes reading out loud, her voice soft and clear, her words wrapping around him like a promise. "You actually like poetry?" she teased one night, smiling. Jordan looked up from the page, his eyes calm for once. "I like peace," he said. She laughed. "And you think poetry is peaceful?" He smirked. "Only when you read it." The moment hung between them, warm, fragile, dangerous. As days turned into weeks, they began sharing simple things that felt like miracles. He taught her how to make pasta from scratch, rolling dough, sprinkling flour, getting it everywhere. She laughed until she cried when he burned the first batch. It was the first time he had laughed, a real, unguarded laugh, in years. At night, they'd stand on the balcony. Bella would look up at the stars, her eyes full of wonder. Jordan would watch her instead, the way the starlight touched her face, the way her heartbeat seemed to echo in his chest. One evening, she stepped closer and wrapped her arms around him. He froze at first. No one had touched him in affection for so long. Then slowly he placed his hands on her back and let himself breathe her in. "You're not a monster, Jordan," she whispered against his chest. Her words were simple, but they struck him deeper than any bullet could. For the first time, he believed it might be true. But peace is a fragile thing in a violent world. Outside his walls, whispers began to spread. Enemies watched, listened, waited. One of his men brought bad news late one night. "Boss, they know," he said grimly. Jordan's voice turned to steel. "Know what?" "That you care about the girl. They're planning something." The words hit him like a storm. He'd built his life to survive threats, but this time the threat wasn't aimed at him. It was aimed at her. He looked out the window where Bella sat reading by the fire, unaware of the danger closing in. His chest tightened with something he hadn't felt in years, fear. He walked to her, his eyes soft but haunted. "Bella," he said quietly, "promise me you'll stay close, no matter what happens." She frowned, sensing the weight in his voice. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," he lied, forcing a smile. "Just promise me." She nodded, though she didn't understand. He touched her cheek, his thumb brushing her skin with aching gentleness. In his heart he knew the truth. His love for her wasn't his weakness. It was his humanity returning. But in his world, humanity could get you killed. That night, while she slept peacefully upstairs, Jordan sat alone in the dark, loading his gun. The peace she brought him was worth protecting, even if it cost him everything. But before dawn, the enemy would strike. And when the first gunshot echoed through the mansion, Jordan would realize love wasn't his weakness anymore. It was his greatest weapon. The evening sky burned orange over the mansion, calm and beautiful. Too calm. Bella loved that hour. It was when the world softened, when even shadows looked kind. She stepped into the garden barefoot, letting the cool grass touch her feet, the scent of roses wrapping around her like peace. Inside, Jordan was in his office, signing papers, but his mind wasn't on business. He kept glancing at the window where he'd last seen her smile. Something about that stillness outside bothered him. It was too quiet for his world. Then it happened. A single pop cracked the air, sharp, deadly, unmistakable. Gunfire. Jordan's instincts snapped alive. He was on his feet before his glass hit the floor. "Bella!" he shouted, his voice echoing like thunder. Outside, chaos exploded. Dark figures moved between the hedges. Muzzles flashed. Bullets tore through the night air. Bella screamed and dropped behind a stone fountain as glass shattered around her. Jordan burst through the doors, gun in hand, his eyes wild with fear and fury. His men were already firing back, but the attack was everywhere. Fast, coordinated, merciless. The rival gang had come for one thing, her. He moved through the chaos like a storm. Every step, every shot, was pure instinct, trained by years of survival, fueled now by something far more dangerous than anger. Love. "Get her out of here!" one of his men shouted. "No," Jordan roared. "I'm not leaving her." He found her near the roses, trembling, blood splattered on her white dress. Not hers, thank God. When she saw him, her eyes widened in shock and relief. "Jordan!" He grabbed her wrist, pulled her behind him, shielding her with his own body as bullets whizzed past. They ran toward the side wall, ducking behind a marble statue. Her breath came in sharp sobs. He touched her face quickly. "Stay with me. Don't look back." A grenade rolled across the lawn. Without thinking, he pushed her to the ground and covered her completely as the explosion ripped through the garden, flames rising high. His back burned, his body shook, but he didn't let go. When the smoke began to clear, most of the attackers had fallen. His men had arrived in force, pushing them back into the darkness. Sirens echoed faintly in the distance. The war was over, for now. Jordan knelt beside Bella, his chest heaving. She was safe, alive, but his shirt was soaked with blood. Her hands trembled as she touched his wound. "You're hurt." He smiled weakly, his voice low and rough. "Just a scratch." But they both knew it was more than that. Tears streamed down her face. "You risked your life for me," she whispered. Her voice broke, soft and raw. He lifted his hand, brushing her cheek with trembling fingers. "You're my life now," he said simply. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead against his, crying quietly as the garden burned behind them. The smell of smoke mixed with roses, and the world felt still again. The calm after the storm, but not peace. Because even as Jordan bled in her arms, his eyes stayed sharp. He knew this wasn't over. Someone had dared to touch what was his, and the war for love had just begun. As the fire died and the night grew quiet, Jordan swore vengeance. But what he didn't know was that the next battle wouldn't come from his enemies. It would come from his own heart. Days passed like whispers in the mansion. The scent of medicine lingered faintly in the halls, mixing with the warmth of burning wood and the soft rhythm of rain that never came. Only wind against the glass. Jordan lay in bed, his shoulder bandaged, his strength slowly returning. But it wasn't the doctors or his men who healed him. It was her. Bella. She refused to leave his side. Every morning she entered his room quietly, her steps light as feathers, her heart steady even when fear tried to break it. She read to him, not the kind of books he was used to, full of darkness and crime, but stories about love, hope, and second chances. Sometimes, when she laughed at a funny line, he found himself smiling too, even when pain burned in his body. At night she brought him soup, homemade, soft and simple. She'd sit by the edge of his bed, feeding him spoon by spoon, teasing him gently when he grumbled. "Don't act tough," she'd say with a small smile. "Even kings need care." He would smirk, but behind that look was gratitude, and something he'd never let anyone see before, affection. The days turned into weeks. His wounds healed, but his heart grew restless. He had built empires, commanded armies of men, but never once had he felt this quiet ache, this peace that came from watching a woman hum while fixing his pillow. It terrified him, and yet, it completed him. One evening the world slowed down again. They sat by the fireplace, the same place where truth had once broken through the walls around his heart. The flames danced softly, painting her face in gold and amber. Bella looked at him for a long moment before whispering, "I used to think love was gentle, but now I know. Sometimes it's brave." Jordan turned to her, his breath catching. He had faced bullets, betrayal, and bloodshed without flinching. But this quiet confession, disarmed him completely. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, his fingers trembling slightly. Her eyes met his. Honest, pure, full of something he didn't believe existed anymore. Trust. Bella, he breathed, her name like a prayer, and then he kissed her, slowly, deeply, carefully, not like a man claiming something, but like a man returning home after years of wandering in the dark. The kiss was warm, patient, the kind that didn't demand, only promised. Her hands rested on his chest, feeling the steady beat beneath her fingertips, the heart that everyone thought was made of ice, now melting under her touch. For that moment, the world outside didn't exist. No guns, no enemies, no shadows. Only two broken souls finding light in each other. The sinner and the saint, bound not by power or fear, but by something far more powerful, love. When they finally pulled apart, she smiled through tears. "You don't have to be alone anymore," she whispered. He pressed his forehead against hers, his voice low, full of awe. "I don't want to be." The fire crackled, their fingers intertwined, and silence wrapped around them like peace finally found. But somewhere deep in the city, a phone rang in a dark room. A voice whispered, "We found her." As love bloomed inside the mansion, danger outside grew sharper. Jordan didn't know. The world he'd fought to keep away was coming straight for Bella. Winter melted softly into spring, and the world around Jordan King changed in ways no one could have imagined. The man who once ruled Chicago's underworld with fire in his eyes and blood on his hands had vanished, leaving behind not just a kingdom of crime, but a version of himself he never wanted to see again. He walked away from it all. The mansion, the money, the men who would have died for him. He sold everything, quietly, without fanfare or farewell. Because for the first time, he wasn't running from his enemies. He was running toward something, someone. Bella. Together, they disappeared into a quiet corner of Montana, where the mountains touched the clouds and the morning smelled of dew and cinnamon. It was a place so peaceful that even the ghosts of his past couldn't follow him there. They found a small sunlit shop on Main Street, a place with creaky floors and wide windows that caught every bit of morning light. That's where Bella's haven was born. Each day began the same, yet felt like a miracle. Jordan woke before dawn, grinding coffee beans while soft music played in the background. Bella baked pastries with flour on her cheeks, humming a tune that made the whole place feel like home. The air was filled with the scent of sugar, vanilla, and hope. Locals adored them, not knowing who Jordan once was, not caring either. To them, he was just the quiet man who made the best coffee in town and smiled whenever his wife laughed. He didn't carry a gun anymore. He carried love. In the way he looked at Bella, in the way he opened the bakery door for customers, in the way he lived without fear. Every scar, every memory, every sin, all of it had led him to this moment of peace. One golden evening, as the sun began to set behind the pines, Bella came up behind him while he stood by the counter. She wrapped her arms around his waist, resting her cheek against his back. The world outside glowed with orange light, and for a moment everything was silent, except their hearts beating in rhythm. "You changed for love," she whispered softly. Jordan turned to face her, his eyes filled with warmth that no fire could burn away. He kissed her forehead gently, his lips lingering there like a promise kept. "No," he said with a quiet smile. "Love changed me." Bella smiled, tears shining in her eyes. And in that simple moment, surrounded by the scent of bread and coffee, the Mafia boss who once ruled a city became just a man at peace. They watched the sunset together, hand in hand, as the lights of their little bakery glowed behind them. Children laughed outside. A new life had begun, one that didn't need power or fear, only love, faith, and forgiveness. And so their story became a living lesson, that even the coldest hearts can find warmth again, that love isn't just soft, it's brave, healing, and real, and that redemption isn't found by running from the past but by choosing a better future. As the last light faded from the sky, Jordan whispered one last truth, not to her but to himself. "I thought I was made for darkness, but she showed me. Even I could belong to the light." The sign outside their shop swayed gently in the evening breeze. Bella's haven, where love heals everything. And for once in his life, Jordan King finally believed it. No one is beyond redemption. Love can change even the hardest hearts, and peace begins when power ends. In a world chasing strength, this story reminds us, real strength is choosing love.